Hi everyone, let's get started. Great, thanks for joining us today for our Women Who Code Python event, building Python projects for Resume Booster. This event, we're on topic 4, web development. This will be a two-part series. We'll be focusing on backend today, which will touch on Flask, PostgreSQL, React, and a few other things. And really looking forward to having you join us today. So now I'll introduce our speaker. Our speaker, Chethana Gopinath. She is a software engineer at Realtor.com and a senior lead at Women Who Code Python. She resides in California, enjoys learning, solving problems, and spends her free time experimenting with new cuisines and flavors in her kitchen and exploring beautiful scenic places. Chethana, over to you.
Cool. Welcome everybody to today's session on web development. We're going to be creating the backend of a full stack web app. The goal of this overall Resume Booster series is to empower individuals to stand out during their job search process. And in addition to teaching how to effectively create strong resumes, we will also help you to create projects that are good additions to your resume. Cool. So web development. Like I said before, we're going to be creating a web app. It's a simple expense tracker, and we will be using Flask and PostgreSQL for the database, and React would be more of we would add the pieces that we need to connect to React. React is the front-end framework that we'll be using later in the next session, but it's just I just thought let's introduce it now. And then we will also talk about how to improve the whole app together in terms of features that you can add and the development process. This is like a general overview of the sessions together. For today's goal, we're going to be setting up the Flask server for the expense tracker app that we're making. And then these are the individual steps that we have. We're gonna take the repo that I have here in GitHub already, which is basically an empty repository at this point, but we're going to be adding things to it. So we're going to be cloning that. And then we will set up our virtual environment, which is where we will be working on, like, it's our workspace to work on to create like the Flask server. And a virtual environment is nice because you can keep all the versions needed for your app within that workspace or environment itself. It doesn't have to interfere with like existing things outside of your project scope. So that's pretty cool. So we're going to be doing that. And then we will set up our expense tracker database with username and password. And then we'll create the table for expenses, and then we'll add the columns to it. That's all that'll happen as we go. I'm going to be outlining these steps again in a second. And then once we create the table, we'll write the endpoints needed to create and get expenses from the database. And then we'll test that our endpoints or routes work using Postman. Cool. And before we dive in, I just wanted to take a quick second to say that it's okay if you're working on a project and you feel that it's probably already out there, or you feel like it's something that's whatever I make, it's just going to be out there, so there's no purpose of doing it. But that's not the case. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot of patterns. You can apply the same patterns from one framework or stack. You can apply the same thing to multiple things. It's a lot of like learning, and you're doing something you love. If you if you have an idea and you feel like, okay, I want to work on this, just do it. And then take inspiration from the code that's already there, maybe if you're stuck. So yeah, just wanted to point that out. And always choose a tech stack that you feel that you're comfortable with. Don't get into the trend of saying, hey, so this is needed for, like, this is I guess this is the newest stack out there, so I'm going to be looking at that. if you have a solid foundation already, you can apply that across to like the newer stacks as well. So have the foundation and then explore other things. Cool. That's what I've outlined here. Okay, now let's dive in. The steps basically that we are going to be working on today are outlined here. This isn't super exhaustive of all of the sub steps that we have, but these are the 5 main steps that we need to create our backend server using Flask. So the prerequisites for this is you need to have brew installed already, or brew is fine. So you need to have brew, you need to have pip, which is a package manager for Python. So if you're working on Python things, it's easier with just pip. I think if you also have like a data science kind of background or something like that, you in Jupyter notebooks, we all use pip to install certain packages and things that we need. So yeah, pip, and then of course you need Python, whether you're on Windows or a Mac. If you're on a Mac, it's already there. So yeah, it things like that. And then you need PostgreSQL, which is the database, which is for the database for today's session. And then pgadmin is used to view our is a user interface to view all of the database data table and like columns and things like that we're going to create. I'll show it to you and when we get to that step, but you need all of these things. And then the first step for now is to basically let's just get into the steps. The first step is to set up a virtual environment with the needed dependencies. So let's actually hit up our terminal. Actually, even before all of that, we need to make sure that this is the repository that I was mentioning for the expense tracker. It doesn't have anything. It just has like a README that's self-generated when you create repositories on GitHub. So just get this. So what you do is you go to the link. I've already put up the link in the slides. So just go to that link and then get the repo link, and then go to your terminal or whatever. Like if you're on Windows, go to your command prompt, and then this is in my outer level desktop folder. So I'm gonna just do git clone. I'm gonna increase the font a little bit because kind of looks here and there. Okay. Think this might be okay. So we're going to do git clone, and then we will paste whatever we got from here. So this is the repo. This is the URL. This is the, I guess, yeah, this is a URL. So let's just hit that. And then this looks like it pulled it into our system, into our local. So let's just cd into it, which is going to the directory. I'm going to clear this. Okay. Now our first step is to create the virtual environment and needed dependencies. So we're going to be using pip to create something called pipenv, which is going to be how we're going to manage our Python dependencies within the virtual environment. So I talked a little bit about the advantages of a virtual environment, where the environment is isolated and it'll keep the versioning of like tools that you have within itself. It won't clash with things that are outside of it. So it's a tight container kind of thing. It's like containerization, like Docker, and yeah, but this is pipenv. Okay, so let's do, let's first create like a backend folder within our like main folder first. And now let's do backend. Okay. Now let's create let's install pipenv. Pip install pipenv. So for me, there's a chance your output might look different because for me, I already have pipenv. So yeah, okay. So now once this is done, let's create a shell. Let's create the virtual environment basically using pipenv. So I'm gonna hit clear again. Let's do pipenv shell. We're inside backend, right? We're inside backend, and then pipenv shell. Let's create the shell now that we have installed pipenv. So this is creating a virtual environment for us, and this is the location of it. And if you open up, if you open up VS Code, and then let me just open VS Code, and then this would be expense tracker. So if you open this up inside your backend where we created like the virtual environment, you have something called a pip file currently. This has nothing, but as we install like dependencies and things like that, it'll start showing up in here, and then we can install all of them. Cool. So virtual environment is set up. Now it's time to get the dependencies that we want. So how we're going to do this is we'll type pipenv install. So we won't use pip within the environment, we'll use pipenv. This is going to help us, this is going to help with dependency resolution and like multiple advantages to this. So, and this will handle all of the packages for our virtual environment. So let's start by installing Flask. We need Flask because that is the framework that we're using for this session. And then we'll need Flask SQL Alchemy. So SQL Alchemy is like a layer between the language that we're using and then the database. So if you're writing a table and columns and everything within Python, within like the Flask server in Python, the like SQL Alchemy is going to translate all of that into the database. Like if you write queries within like your Python within using Python, it's going to convert all of that into Postgres. Like when we write queries, we don't have to manually create columns and things like that. So that's really cool. Awesome. So that's Flask SQL Alchemy, and then we need psychopg2. So I didn't do PG2. So this is basically used to connect to the database directly, and then the actual connection, and that can be used along with SQL Alchemy together to finish all the work that we want to do within the within our Flask server, which we write in Python. So that's that, and then we need python.env. So if we set up any environment variables which are config that you set up within your app, you don't have to specify it anywhere else. They will, when you run your server, the environment variables will be applied within it. So to basically put it into words, the .env extension would basically take any like environment variable that you write, like you would write maybe, I guess, Flask app, and then you'll mention where your app is actually present, which file it's present in. So it'll take the key and the value, and then it'll basically it'll basically parse through that for us. Okay. So that is .env, and then we're going to install another one called Flask Course. So this is a little bit on to protect us from course errors when we write our React front end, which is a little bit later. For now, just go with this, and let's install this. So we are inside our virtual environment, right? And it's installing all of whatever we want within the virtual environment. So yeah. Let's wait for a second. It's pretty fast. You don't have to like spend a lot of time looking at it. Cool. So it's all done. All of these packages, whatever we wanted, is all installed. So let's clear this once more because it looks messy right now. Let's go here. And now you notice that when you did pip env install, before that, you didn't have like this lock file. And you also did not have all of this. These are all of your dependencies that you created. So once you install, all of this is put into place. Cool. I guess that is like step one, where you install whatever you need, you set up your virtual environment. Cool. Let me go back into this. So this is like, I've just outlined whatever we mentioned here. And this is, these are the dependencies that I was talking about. Cool. Step one done. We only have 4 more steps to finish writing our Flask server. So the second step is to set up our database, and then our user, and then verify, make the connection, and look at the database and pgadmin. So before going into that, if you're Postgres, if you don't already have PostgreSQL installed, then run, if you already have brew, use brew, install this, like PostgreSQL at 14 is like the version, so just install that. And now I already have it installed, so I'm gonna just do, I'm actually gonna open a new, I'm gonna open a new, new tab would have been better. New tab, and then I'm gonna just say pip and shell because I want to have the shell open at 2 places, the virtual environment open at 2 places. So here I'll just do brew, brew services. I think mine is already open for now, so I'm just gonna close it first. So this is to start. This is to. I'll just explain that in a second. Okay, so what you want to do is, I had mine already up, but you would need to do brew services start Postgres SQL at 14, because that's the version you installed, and this starts the Postgres server. And you need this to be able to make all of those database connections and kind of, I guess, add rows, delete rows, whatever it is, you need to have it running in the background. So let's just start that. Cool. So I keep typing clear because I just wanted to look, just wanted to remove all of the other things that are there on the screen already. Once this is done, we're going to go into our Postgres prompt and then create like a create like a database, and then a user for the database, and then we're going to grant privileges for the user to work on that database. Cool. So let me, okay. So let's actually get up the prompt. Cool. This is perfect. It's 14.7, the version of Postgres. So once this is done, let's do create database, and then I'm going to call mine expense tracker. Once this is done, when it is created successfully, it says create database, like that. Okay, so create user, and then I want to say Postgres. I want to say expense user. Okay, this is not like the best name, but it's fine. With password, you're going to set up your password, and let's just call it password. There's definitely better ways to do that, but better passwords out there. So let's for the sake of this session, let's just go with this. And then this has been created. Now we're going to want the user to the user to be able to do all of the things such as read and write and whatever into your database. So let's do grant all privileges, grant all privileges on database. This is a database, so database for, oh yeah, to sorry about that, to expense user, which is the user that we created, and then once this is done, this grants all of the privileges that we want. And then once you finish this, if you want to see what tables and everything, the list of tables that you have, the user and all of that, for that purpose, let's do this. If you see here, I have other test databases, but this is the one that we created right now, which is expense tracker database. Cool. So now that that's done, so we've set up our database basically. Cool. Let's go to pgadmin, and then right now, when you first start up pgadmin, it'll ask you for to set up like a master password. So this should be something that you like a secure password that you have. You're going to be using that on that. I already set mine up, so like I'm at the next steps here. If you don't already have, I have a couple of things already. One thing already. So if you don't, you won't have anything currently, but whether you have it or not, let's just register the server. So in this case, you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Postgres expense. And then in the connection area, currently, for this to actually successfully connect your Postgres services that you started using brew services start, that should already be running. And it's running on your local computer. So let's do localhost and then this, and then your database is going to be expense tracker. And then your username is going to be expense user. Your password would be password, whatever you set up here. Basically, your user is this, your password is this, and then this is your database. Cool. So, okay, that looks good. It connected. And then this is the one that was created now. So if you go into Postgres expense, within the databases, you'll see expense tracker here. These are my previous test ones, so let's not look at that. It's just this current one. Cool. Okay. Let's actually go back to the slides to see where we're at. So we opened up pgadmin and then we connected to the database and everything. Okay, this step looks good. So step 2 done. We have 3 more steps. So the code, the setup is the most intense portion of the entire flow. The actual code, it's something that it's not like as intense, but you should remember that if you miss any of these steps, the code won't work. So it's you need to keep testing as you go that everything looks good. So, okay. Step 3 is work on a simple route to get the server going. We're not going to do anything with the database for step 3. Just write a simple, like plain route and then see if we're able to get that going. Okay. So we are here. Okay. We already have our repo open in VS Code. So this is our expense tracker, this is backend, and this is where we left it before, which is we installed all of our dependencies needed, and we're still within our virtual environment. So we did the virtual environment, we did the database related things set up, creating the database and all of that. So that is done. Now let's actually create the entry point for our Flask server. So this is app.py, and then let's do from Flask, import Flask. This is standard boilerplate, which is even like it'll be there in like the quick start in the Flask documents. So we first need to create an instance of the Flask app. So we're going to do that using Flask, and then this would create our Flask app instance. And once this is done, we're just going to write a simple like hello world function to see if it works. Let's do def hello world, and right now it would just return hello world. Okay, but this wouldn't work as is. You need to we need to convert this into a route, and we can do that using app.route, and then this is the route that you'll find this at. So if you do like localhost and then your port number, everything, and then you hit this route, it should return hello world. And then this is basically this is called a decorator. You can read a little bit more about that. But this essentially in this context, app.route converts a normal function into a view function, which is this, and you can hit this view function like an endpoint, and you can basically interact with it like that. So even from the client, right now we're just writing the backend. So if you're doing the front end, you'll be hitting this from the front end, from the React app or whichever front end framework you're using. Okay, so we've written all this. Let's make sure that we're running it. So we're gonna go with if name equals name return. No, not return. Oh, okay. So it is app.run. If you do that, this is like the entry point. Your execution will start from here. And then once the app server is running, you can hit this route, and then this is going to get returned. So by default, this will run in production mode. So if I want to change it into development mode that I'm that we want right now, let's just pass in debug equals true here. And on that note, we also need to tell Flask where to find this app, where to find our app, right? So when you run like Flask server run, or like when you run your server, where would it find like this entry point? So we already installed something called .env. So we're going to pass in where to find this as where to find the Flask app as an environment variable. So that would be .flask env. And here we're going to do Flask app, and then okay. So we said app because it's app.py. This is where it's present. So let's save that, and then come back here to our terminal, and then we're going to type Flask server run. Okay, Flask run. Yes. My bad. Okay. So now it's running, and it is running at this address. So let's go back to, I guess, let's open a new window, and then let's go into this, and there you go. So hello world that we wrote out there works. So basically our server works. Super cool. Let's go back to our slides. So which we were in step 3, and step 3 was get a route going, and then just use Flask run to run the server, and then that's it. We're done with the 3rd step. Awesome. So 2 more steps. This is like the 4th and the 5th. I think the 4th and the 5th steps are like the most important steps in this like whole process. So we're gonna be writing like the database connectivity code, and then like basically our create expense and get expense endpoint and all of that. So fun stuff. Let's go ahead and work on step 4, one step at a time. So database connectivity and table with columns. Cool. Let's go back to our app.py, and then I'm going to close this part out because it's taking up too much screen space. Right now, we just have Flask. Let's do a couple more imports. So from Flask, SQL Alchemy, let's import SQL Alchemy, which I already mentioned before. It's a layer between the language which you're using and then the database. So we have this, and then we also need, for the database, let's just start with this. We'll add import statements as we go. Right now, you need to set up like an application context for your, basically, it's like binding like the database together with the app. You already have the app, but when you create like a database object, like a connection object, how do you actually connect it together? So they should be under the same application context. I've added a link in the slides to mention application context. Go take a look at that when you have some time. But yeah, let's first create that application context for our app. So app context dot push, actually app context, we should call it dot push. And this looks good. Let's save this, and then once this is done, let's create our database object, which is SQL Alchemy, and then let's bind it to our app. Let's do this, and then we're going to also, this is just this part, but how will it find our database and our user and all of that? So for that, we need to write a database URI. So we're going to have to push it into our app config. So this would be, just use double quotes because that's what we're doing. So SQL Alchemy database. All right. Okay, got the spelling right. Okay, so in here we're gonna start with mentioning it's PostgreSQL, and then the connection string is kind of structured like this: the user, which is expense user, and then password, which is password that we set up before. And then this would be at localhost, which is where we're running all of this. So localhost, our database, basically. And then this is, sorry, I meant to say this is our data, our Postgres services server is running on localhost. So that's why we're mentioning that. And then here we'll write our database name. Cool. Yeah, we've written that, and then we have the database here set up. Cool. So let's just create like the table that we want to create. So we'll use that. We'll do that using like a model. It's called a model. So let's it's like a class that we write. We write a table using a class, and then that class will extend database.model from Flask, and then it'll basically treat whatever we're writing as a table with columns. So that's what we're going to do right now. Cool. So expense is what I'm going to call the table, and then this would extend model. Okay. Model, and then for now let's just let's actually just wait for a second because we need to remember what columns we need. We already need to have this in mind. So we need, essentially, we need an ID to, which is like the unique primary key to identify each expense in the table in the database. So we have ID, created at, and then we need a description for the expense. When we create when we're creating an expense, we need like a description of what this expense is or something, or like why this expense, and then the amount for the expense. And then if you're into categorizing it or like tagging it, do that. So that would be category. Cool. So how does now that we know what we want, let's write it out. Like let's define these columns. So ID equals db.column. And so this is going to be an integer. I want it to be an integer. Cool. And then this is going to be a primary key. And we said that using this. Okay. And as soon as you set primary key equals true, this is the, like in our code, this is what we're going to use. If you have other tables for the, like, as you expand this project, you're gonna, if you want to connect with or like join on expense, you can use ID. Okay. And then you need to create it at, and this would be db.column, db.datetime, and then I'm going to mark it as nullable equals true, which means that this value cannot be empty for any of the records in the database. And then we also don't want to keep, like when we create an expense, I don't want to keep adding like a created at along with it. So it could just be defaulted to what is the current time now. So let's do datetime.utc now. If you're okay with that, like the time zone there. Okay. And why this is showing this line is because we didn't import it here. So let's import datetime. From datetime, import datetime. Cool. Done. And now we have like 3 more fields. Let's do that quickly. So our description, I want it to be a string. And then maybe you can restrict it, but for my case, I'm not gonna restrict the amount of characters in the string, but you can do that too. Okay, so we could just, if you want to like restrict it, then you can just do like the character count that you want here and then go with that. I also don't want this to be nullable because I want all of my expenses to have descriptions. When we're making, when the client is making the request to our server, I want like when they're creating an expense or something, I want them to have values. So that's there. And then db string. Okay. And then speed it up a little bit. db.column. And then this will be db.float, because money, there's like a monetary thing, money type thing too in the database, but I think I'm just going to go with this for my purposes. So nullable equals true. I don't want any of these fields to be empty when coming in. Actually, I'm just gonna, yeah, it's the same as this, so I'm just gonna copy that. Don't have to type it all out. Okay, this looks good. We also need a string representation when somebody is trying to print out whatever is there in the expense. When you create an expense, if you want to see how it looks, we're gonna have like a string representation for that, and you can do that using IPR, and then you can pass in the object that you want, which is our expense. When you do self within the class, it means an instance of that class, which is expense. Okay. So this will return like a, let's do f string because I want to put in strings and like the variables that I want to print out. So let's do expense, and then you have self dot. I just want to print out self dot description, self dot amount, and then self dot category. Okay, that looks good. So with f strings, you can straight up do this. If you're using like they're very versatile, I feel like. So if anybody's, yeah, if you want to read more into it, you can look it up. It is f strings in Python. So cool. So we need the most important thing of all, which is the init constructor. Oh, it filled it out for me already, but I don't want this. Okay. So this will assign whatever we're sending in from, like, when you create like an expense object, you'll be sending in like a description and then an amount and category already from the client. And every time I mention client, I mean like the front end that is that is talking to the back end. So, okay. For this, I just want to set the incoming description amount category to and bind it to our expense object. So self dot description equals description, the incoming one, self dot amount equals amount, and then self dot category equals category. Cool. So that is done. Okay, that's a lot, but the model looks to be done finally. Okay, so now that this is done, we need to, this is not already existing in the database right now. This table is not present already. We need to make sure to create it. So let me show you, let me verify that first. So this is pgadmin. We already have the database that we created. So when you go into that, when you go into schemas, and then when you look at tables, you have nothing here. When you click on this down arrow thing, nothing pops up. So there's nothing currently there. But we're going to create this with the columns. So let's actually go into this. Let me actually quit this. I don't want Postgres currently, because like my services are already running, like the Postgres server. Okay, so I want to go into my, you are inside your virtual environment even now. So I'm going to go into the Python prompt, and then I'm going to do yeah, so now I'm going to do from app import db. I'm going to make sure that what we're doing, the model that we created right now, we're applying to the database and actually creating something. So let's do that. This looks good. So let's do db dot, this is what creates it all. So db dot create all. Let's see. Okay. db, made a mistake here. So it should be db dot create all, not create dot all. Okay. Cool. So that looks good. Let me actually exit out of the prompt, clear it out. And then, so what we did was we just took whatever is here essentially, and then we created the table and the columns, and that's a migration. So like we basically did that. Let's go see if it actually worked. So we're back to pgadmin. We are in the expense tracker database, and then we're in schemas, and then we go here, we see tables. right click on the tables and then do refresh. Awesome. So as soon as you refreshed, you see the expense table. I'm trying to see if I can increase the font. Oh, okay, perfect. So you're seeing that this expense table got created because that's what we did there. So let me see if the columns look good. Awesome. So we have ID created at description, amount, category. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Whatever we wanted is there, which is perfect. So let's go back to our slides. We did a lot of work in this one, but let's just see. Okay. We added our database connectivity thing, and then we created the table and the columns. So step 4 is done. Awesome. 4 steps all done. We only have like the smallest portion of work left, which is creating the actual endpoints, which the client can hit, and then they can create the expense and view all the expenses or whatever. So yeah, this is all the setup needed to get there. So let's do step 5 now. Let's go back here, close this out because it looks a lot, and then I don't want this either. Remove that. Maybe I'll just comment it so that when we upload the code, this is there as a comment for now. Okay. Let's do def. Actually, let me start by writing the decorator itself. So app.route, and then we're going to create we're going to use this route. I want it to be expenses. When somebody hits expenses, and then when they're trying to post to the database, which is an HTTP request to insert something into the database, insert whatever value they're giving from the client into the database. So expenses, and then methods, and then within this methods array, this is like the array where we mentioned if we want to do a post or get or whatever. So for now I'm doing a post, and you can do like multiple things in this array. You can have one endpoint do like posting to the database, getting things from the database, whatever. You don't have to. That is the purpose of this being an array. If it was a single string, then yeah, it's not like that. So yeah, cool. Let's do create expenses, capitalizing errors. Create expense, actually, because we're just creating one expense. We're not doing bulk expense creations here. Let's do that. And then yeah, so let's do basically whatever we're getting from the request. We're going to be pulling out those variables. So you have request.json, it comes in a JSON. So you have request.json, and then you'll have the description. We're going to be making these requests to hit this endpoint. So you'll see what I mean when we test it in Postman. So description, and then amount is request.json amount. And then category is going to be request.json category. Okay. Now you'll see that this request thing has a squiggly line here, which means it wasn't imported. Let's go ahead and import it. Okay, looks good. It's gone. Perfect. So now that we have these 3 things, we need to insert this into the database. So how do we do that? We need to invoke our expense model. So let's do that. And then let's see how it works. So expense, and then we're going to be passing in like our description, amount. Okay. So as soon as we write this, it means that we're basically invoking this method. This is like the constructor that is invoked as soon as we create an instance of a class. So when you pass in the request description, request amount, and request category into this expense object, it sets it, it basically sets it to the instance of expense within that, it's kind of weird to like explain it, but what you can be sure of is that this expense will have all of the things that you want, that you're sending in from the client. And then you can basically just commit it. You can add it to your, you can add this object to your session like this. And then, so now your database session will have this expense object. But the thing is, when the session closes out or something like that, it won't persist or it won't be sent to your database. To do that, you have to commit whatever you did so far. So db.session.commit. So this will make sure that it is sent to the database and it commits to the database, which means it'll create a record with an expense record with whatever you sent here. So your description, amount, and category. So it will create the record for you at this point. So that is awesome. And then just to see that it has done whatever it said it would do, we're going to print out whatever we want. So whatever we sent in, I guess, like to this expense object. So let's see. It should be returned as a JSON object because we can't just return a database object. It will throw errors. So we should take out whatever is in expense, like expense dot description, expense dot amount, expense dot category. We need to take out each of it and then put it into a JSON and then send it to our client. Okay. So that would be expense, I guess created expense would be a better word, better variable name. Let's create like a dictionary. JSON is dictionary in like when you're talking about it in Python ways. So let's do description, and then we're going to do expense dot description, and then let's do amount and do expense dot amount. You know what I mean? Very cool. And then we're going to just return this to the client, which is expense. Okay. Cool. We now have one endpoint ready, which is to create the expense. Let's see if it actually works or if it's going to throw a lot of errors. It's fine. We'll debug all of it. Don't worry. So let's go into, let's go into our, let's make sure we quit this. This is a Flask server that's already running, which we did when we tested the Hello World endpoint. So let's quit this and then let's run it again because it needs to take in the new changes that we have. So clear it out. Do Flask run. And then this is going to run here. That's cool. Let it keep running. But now let's go into Postman, which is our current client because we don't have our front end. It's an app that you can install. You can test a lot of, you can basically test your endpoints using Postman. So let me do that. Ooh, don't save. I think that's some stuff that was already there. Okay. So what you're going to need to do is go and like create, it would look like this, and then you're going to click on this thing that will create like a new request. So I already have it up, but let me just copy over whatever I had in mind. It will look empty like this. So you're going to do HTTP localhost, and then 5000 is the port. Localhost is this part of it, okay? And then actually this part of it, 127, that thing. And then this is the port number. So that's already in there. And then this is a post request. You have to change, there are like multiple requests. So this is a post request. And then you go into your body, the request body that you're sending. And I'm going to choose raw. And then here I want to say JSON, because I'm sending in the request also as a JSON. So how should this look like? Let me type in, what do we want to send? Increase the font. Yeah, do that. I think it should be fine. I'm going to increase it a little bit more. I'll decrease it in a second. So we're typing description, we're sending that in, and this should be, maybe this should be a string. So I'm just going to type my first expense. And then next we'd have our amount, which is going to be, I guess, let me do 100. Not sure what I'm spending it on, but okay. And then category would be, I want to say personal. You can put in whatever category that you want. Just remember, this is going to be a string. This would be a float. It'll take it in as a float. And then this would be a string as well, these three fields. I'm gonna kind of unzoom for a second and then pull this back. Let's see if it works, right? Let's hit send. Need something. Okay, create expense. Oh, okay, made a mistake in the, you probably already saw it when I was doing the variable name thing. But yeah, so instead of created expense, I did create expense. And that's why I was mentioning that, like it was mentioning that it did not return a valid response and all that. A lot of scary errors, but okay. It was just a variable name change. So let me save that, run it again. Clear, run it again. Let's go in. And at this point, this would have, my first expense would have already been committed to the database, because the failure happened at the return. So like we already finished db.commit here, and then the failure was here. So this would already be in the database, the first one that we created. So for that purpose, I'm going to say my second expense. Thought that was fully selected. Okay, my second expense, I'm going to do $200 this time. Let it just be personal. I want to see, I'm going to run this once more. I think I already ran it, but just to make sure. And then let's hit send. Ooh, so if you noticed, this is returning amount category description, which is what we sent in. But the magic part of this is that it has finished all of the committing and everything, and then it is returning whatever we wanted to return from the expense object, database object that we created. Awesome. So one endpoint works. And to make sure that this actually has been populated in the database, let's go over to pgadmin, and then we're already at the, I guess, like expense tracker, schemas, and then you went into tables, and then you're at this expense portion. So right click on this expense, which is the table, and then let's view or edit data, and then view data all rows. Okay, that ran. And now if you notice in the database, I'm going to actually move this a little bit here. In the database, you're seeing that it has been created. So you have your ID, my first expense, my second expense, and then you're seeing the timestamp, right? So it's like it's created 1 minute after. A minute? Yeah, a minute. Yeah. So that looks good. We have our create expense endpoint in place. So let's do get expenses, so that we don't have to look into the database all the time, and it just returns whatever we want. So whatever expenses that are created that we want to see. Okay, last endpoint. Let's go. App.route. Okay. This should also be expenses. Expenses. Yeah, the same route. And then this is what, if you notice, this is what we use in Postman here. So we're doing localhost and then port and then expenses / expenses. So that is the route portion of this. So I guess methods. I want to write 2 specific endpoints for get and post. So I'm doing that. We're going to do get expenses. For now, I'm just listing all expenses. I'm not listing like a specific expense. Cool. Let's to get all the expenses, what do we need to do? We need to get the expenses from the database directly. So let's do that. How do we do that? We call our model. So expense dot query, we query it, and then we do all. So this returns like an iterable that we can iterate through and then print this in whatever format we want. We want it to be JSON because it won't print out a list. It's going to throw an error to us, similar to the error we just saw. So let's do for, I guess, let's create expenses list. Yeah, and then each portion of it should be a JSON. Overall, we can just return this, but each portion should be JSON. It won't return, this as is will just have database objects as a list, but I want it to be JSON objects. So let's do this, and then for expenses, let's actually do retrieve expense, and then retrieve expense, and then this should have this should have ID. I want it to have all the fields. So expense dot ID. And then I wanted to have created at. Basically, I'm pulling out whatever I want from the database for each of these objects and what I want to see actually. So we created at, and then you'll have a description. Start category. Making a lot of typos, but yeah, okay. Category, and then what was the last one? Oh, it was actually amount. Oh, well, it's fine. It's fine in the order here. Actually, I want it to be amount first. Expense dot amount. Let's actually do that. Okay, so once this is for each expense, I'm retrieving this, and then I want to make sure I save this format somewhere. So we already have our expenses list created here. We're just going to append what we have here into this. So that is retrieved expense. Perfect. And then once we do all this stuff for all of the expenses that are there in the database, for our purposes, it's just going to be 2 because we just created 2. So return expenses list. Okay, this looks good, I think. So yeah, let's go back here and then stop the server and then run it again. Go back to Postman. At this point, it is at post, but I wanted to get things for me. So get, And then the route is the same. I didn't change that. And then we don't really need this. If you want, it's anyways not going to look at anything in the request object. If you noticed here, we're just querying what's in the database. And here, if you notice, we did request.json. So it doesn't matter what you sent here. Let's see, it's just, it has to return two records. Perfect, it's doing that. Let me increase the font a little bit. So this is the results portion of it. So it's returning amount 100. Notice how it just randomly converts it into float. We just sent it in as an integer. So that's cool. That's good. And I should have done, okay, so it's printing it in the order that I inserted in. So, or it's doing, okay, I think it's alphabetizing it. So A comes first, C comes first. Okay, that's fine. So you can sort it out if you want, any way that you want, but you're not going to display it as is in the front end. You're going to do more changes to it, and then you're going to display it really well and all that. So for our purposes, it looks good. We have the two things in here. That is, it's successfully getting from the database and then displaying it to us. Awesome. So let's go back to our slides. Okay. Create endpoints. We were on step 5 right now. So set up endpoint for posting an expense, and then verify it works. Set up endpoint for getting an expense, verify it works. It works. Yay. Okay. So create step 5 is done. Cool. So we have successfully built a Flask server, and it is currently taking creating an expense and then getting expenses from the database. So we have 2 endpoints that are in place. We are using Postgres for like our database, and then we have established that all of this works. Awesome. So what are the next steps? We need to build out our front end for this using create React app, and that will be our client that calls these endpoints. So we won't be using Postman anymore. Postman is for like testing the endpoints, and it works. So we're going to be doing that. And then this is just 2 endpoints that we've written for some of like, I guess, some things that you may want to use it for, but there are definitely better, like more improved things that you can do with this, more nuanced things. Maybe we can discuss some of that next. And then in terms of features and then code and dev process, for example, right now, you notice we're shutting our server down every single time we make a change, and then we're bringing it back up. You can make it so that the server keeps watching for changes, and then it automatically updates things. So that's fun. So all of that, things like that. And then features wise, you can, like I'm just creating 2 endpoints here. You can create an endpoint for delete. You can create an endpoint for update. You can get one single expense from the database. You can pass in an ID that you want, and you can do that. So yeah, you can do all of that stuff. We'll discuss a little bit more next time on that. And then we'll also discuss about some general thoughts about like web development and things that people talk about online. There's a lot around web development in any language that you pick. Python is like definitely, there's a lot going on. So we'll talk about that. So don't miss part 2 on this series. And you can keep in touch with us in our Slack channel, Resume Booster Projects. And with that, we're good to go.